What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff. Little thing we like to call the 3 and Out podcast. It is Fugazi Friday, but that is going to have to wait because we got a special guest today. This podcast is going to be an interview with longtime contract negotiator, one of Howie Roseman's right-hand men for the Philadelphia Eagles for the last 12 plus years, Jake Rosenberg, who just left the Eagles this year and is now working in the NIL world, working with Oklahoma, started a company, partnered in a venture that's going to get involved in that. And, you know, just a very interesting resource. I mean, where do you hear people talk? I want to do something contract for dummies, kind of just go over dead cap, signing bonuses, cash flow, stuff that most of us, when you read these tweets from Rap Sheet or Shefty, they're just confusing, like what is real, what is not. I mean, this guy's been writing them for a long time and dealt with some obviously enormous deals, several quarterback contracts, Wentz, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown. So he's and every other Eagle made a lot of money over the last decade plus. So very fired up. We reconnected, shot him a DM. We hadn't talked in a little while, and like this guy a lot. Just a good dude. Very, very smart. Very, very smart. We'll get into his story a little bit and then just BS a little bit about contracts. So this is going to be the podcast. I know some stuff around the NFL happened. I'll probably get to that next week. Nothing big happened today besides Justin Herbert being injured and being in a boot for a couple weeks, which not ideal, especially if you were thinking about betting on the Chargers, though plantar fasciitis goes away in theory. So let's keep our fingers crossed that he's around because I want to watch him and Harbaugh play, but that's not an ideal start to training camp. But there's not much to be said there beside, thank God it's August 1st. But before we dive into Jake, you know, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and most importantly, the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. You guys want to do something? You want to go to a game? You want to go to a football game? You want to go to watch your baseball team play in the playoffs or the World Series? What about a concert? Go out and enjoy yourself. Listen, I don't even need to thank you on this. I'm giving you free money. I'm giving you a promo code to save you a little cash to go have a good time. We're always like, what are we going to do this weekend? Go to a concert. Go to a comedy show. Go get a laugh in. Go enjoy your life. And do it on us with my friends at Game Time, who's the easiest ticketing app I've ever used by a country mile. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. Very, very excited. We got I would say a very unique guest here. Longtime contract negotiator, formerly the vice president of football administration with the Eagles. He even was slinging some commodities back in the day in the financial markets. Is currently a partner and just a game changer for the athlete group who's dealing with NIL, just partnered up with the University of Oklahoma. I don't know, you might have heard of them. They've won a few games over the years. And Jake Rosenberg joins us. Jake, good to see you, buddy.
Awesome. Great to see you too. It's a reunion of sorts.
How you doing?
I'm great. Everything's good. You know, I'm not in training camp. I'm actually visiting my in-laws in Michigan in August. It's a strange new world I'm living in, but everything's great.
Just for everyone listening, you leaving the Eagles was a pretty big story, but I kind of want to rewind. Can you just give me a little background? I mean, I know it, but just for everyone listening, what you did out of college and then what led you. We overlapped a little bit in Philly and kind of what you've been doing for the last decade plus with the
Sure.
Eagles and Jeffrey and
Yeah.
Howie.
Yeah. I went to University of Pennsylvania, 2 years of management consulting, about 12 or 13 in commodities trading. I was on the floor at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was off the floor trading bonds electronically with a group. Built that up, did some stuff, moved back east with my wife, my son, had my daughter. But all the while I was looking for a way to pivot. I always wanted to work in sports. I started a sports technology, a scouting app on a Palm Pilot in 2003. Failed venture, but I got to know some people in the NFL, got a little bit of a taste of the whole thing, and then rolled out of trading, took an internship with the Eagles, had an opportunity. I commuted from North Jersey down to Philly for about 11 months, but really fortunate timing there. I stepped into an opportunity primarily overseeing cap contract stuff, negotiations, and then Howie and I worked really, really closely up until May 15th. And so I oversaw the financial side primarily, but there's not a lot of people in an NFL front office, and having been there as long as I had and had Howie's trust in the relationship, I was involved in pretty much everything, all the strategic decisions we made, a lot of the hiring and coaching searches and stuff like that. I got experience broadly, entire roster, staffing, etc.
I want to speak really quick because I get asked a lot about younger people that have questions about their future or are deciding whether to leave and, to follow their passion, take a step back. Obviously there was a pivot point in your life. I would imagine you had done pretty well on definitely on some given years with the commodities. So to take an internship to follow a passion, how you were over 30 at the time, I'd imagine that was a
35.
pretty
35.
big
Yeah.
was
Could have made a comedy about me starting an internship, kissing my wife and 2 children goodbye.
I mean, that was a pretty big financial. Do you remember what that internship paid?
I honestly have no idea, but
50K or something. I mean, it couldn't have been much.
I don't even know. I don't even think I was making 50K as an intern, but it didn't last super long. And in full disclosure, typically when people are like crushing it in trading, they don't necessarily look to make career pivots. My career in trading, unbelievable market timing. When I first started trading, a lot of the electronic markets were just starting to come into their own. There was a lot of low hanging fruit. It was easy. I mean, it wasn't, people didn't have these super advanced strategies, weren't throwing a whole lot of technology at it. So I did really well very quickly. I had a lot of fun, enjoyed that life. It was very loose and lax, and I was making money, and it was great. But then as I got older, as the business got more competitive, a lot of capital thrown at it, a lot of technology. The Chicago trading scene was built on a lot of locals who had spent time in the pits where there's no technology. That's more just like playing a sport and reacting. And I don't know, a lot of us, I had a ton of friends that traded, and a lot of people in the same situation where as the business evolved, we were kind of stuck in what we knew and just sitting there playing a sport. And people are like, we're fighting each other with like plastic forks, and people are taking out machine guns. It's, so that all happened. In trading, I loved the competitive side and how objective it was. And there was no saying, "Hey, boss, I did a great job." I didn't have a boss, but you weren't saying you did a
Yeah, I
great
know what you
job.
mean.
It's literally, I made money, I didn't make money. How much money did I make? That's the scorecard, and you really couldn't fight it, which is awesome. That's pure. That's very few businesses, I think, like that. And so that got harder and harder. I started picking up people and things in my life, and I never felt stressed trading, knowing I never made a salary in the 13 odd years I traded. It was all eat what you kill. And then it just got tougher over time, and it was less like playing a sport and more like drudgery of, oh shit, I just put in 6 months and I am worse than where I started. But so that it didn't make the decision for itself necessarily, but I was thinking at that point, like, I need to figure out what's next. And sports has always been my number one passion in life, without question. And so I was trading in New York, living in North Jersey. And there was a situation where the group I was trading with, our trading capital, was being held at a clearinghouse. That's supposed to be, your money is just parked there. It's not at risk necessarily. And there was some kind of issue where that all of a sudden was held and we couldn't use it, and just sitting there, not sure if we were going to get our trading capital back. And that was a breaking point. I was just like, you know what? I think this is a sign. There's just too much going on. I need to figure out what to do with myself. And a few times I'd had conversations about whether I would be interested in doing some type of cap roll, or, and taking this step. It wasn't something I could see doing when I was in Chicago, or when I was crushing it and I had tons of time, and ability to kind of control my life. But then it was like, yeah, this makes sense. This is something that I really want to do. My wife was very consistent in saying, this is a chance for you to do exactly what you want to do. Don't sweat what's going to happen here, because, as you know, this is a very difficult profession for wives and families, in the sense that there's a lot of time. And my wife and I started dating and everything while I had a very easy schedule. We had a great life. We spent lots of time together. And then it pivoted to where I was at work a lot. And for the beginning, when I was commuting, leave, hour and a half each way, it was like 83 miles each way. So I'd be at my desk by 7 a.m. or so, leave the house at 5:30, and then get home. If I left the office at 7:30 or on a weeknight, I'm not really seeing my kids during the week. So it wasn't awesome, but it was a means to an end. It was like something everyone else, most people do in life. You do what you gotta do.
Well, I wanted to do something with you called Contract for Dummies, because most people, including myself,
Dummies.
and millions of people watch the NFL and have no one comprehends these contracts. But you get out, you start working for Howie, and then within a couple of years, Andy's gone. Chip comes in, and within a couple of years, when Howie went on a sabbatical, because you were working very close, did that change your role? Did that all of a sudden become like, what's going to happen here?
Sabbatical.
I think that's what Howie calls it.
Politically correct. Yeah. I say we were in exile. It's fine.
Did you get exiled as well?
Oh yeah, I had a view of the dumpster over on Pattison. It was great. Yeah, I got exiled as well. I did a lot of the traveling around with Howie, hitting up our networks and talking to teams and doing all kinds of stuff. And we were thinking, don't know if it's going to happen in Philly, but if it happens here or wherever it happens, where we get a chance to come back and run a team, let's make sure we're doing it in the smartest, best way possible, and not just the way it's always been done or the way we've seen here. So we talked to baseball teams, basketball teams, hockey teams, successful business people, and just got best practice on a million different things. So whenever we were taken out of the tower, out of exile, we were going to be ready to go. And I
who was your favorite conversation of that kind of little run?
We had a lot of great conversations. I remember going down, we visited with the Braves. We talked to didn't
you go San Antonio, RC Buford?
Howie became close with RC. Yep. Through that process.
Bezos?
No, we weren't in that type of spheres. No, sports wise. At the time we went to Chicago, met with the Blackhawks, the Braves. It was there was a lot of stuff. We went to New York. We hit up some successful business people that we knew. It was a really interesting process. And then I think actually it sort of still shapes the way I think. And a lot of what's gone on in Philly since Howie came back in 2016 as a direct result of that. We talked to baseball teams and talked about player development and things that in the NFL are, there's a thing where people sometimes will just throw their hands up. They'll be like, we can't do that because of like these 5 things, and I'm actually seeing this in college right now, which I know we'll talk about later, but everything's just in total chaos. This is a mess. We're screwed, basically. Put your head between your knees, assume crash position. But, and player development in the NFL, because of the rules and because of how players' time is so carefully regulated, how long they could be in the building for that period of time, 8 or 9 weeks in the off season, dead period between the end of the season and the start of your off season, and then dead period from the day your off season program ends until you report for training camp. People just think that you can't thoughtfully develop the back end of your roster. I think that's just a prevailing notion because you don't have enough time. It's a physical sport, so you can't, put extra physical demands on them. And then during the season, time is short, particularly on the coaching side. So it's rare. You're not really going to ask your coaches to spend extra time to help develop players because they're heavily engaged in game planning and getting starters and key players ready. So I think that's the norm. And then when Howie came back after a lot of the things that we'd seen baseball teams who were signing kids at like 16 years old who didn't even speak English. And they had 7 years or 6 years to get them to the big leagues and function in an American city they were going to live in. That's incredible amount of development, right? You're teaching the language and customs and also trying to make them freaking good players. So that wasn't going to be what we did, but full-time development people, a legitimate formal program. This is something as I ran like the undrafted free agent signing period for us for a long time. And when you're trying to get kids who are dejected that they weren't drafted, right, and you don't have a lot of money to spend, these are the things that you're trying to sell them on. Like, look, we don't just sit here during the season and have our practice squad read cards and, draw a big line in the sand. Like, we'll see you next July. We'll try to develop you then. They have extra periods and there's all kinds of things where we're still trying to improve you. And the coaches are on it. It's everyone is pulling in that direction. And I think those are legitimate takeaways from having a process like that.
Before we dive into the contracts, you went on record to all the Philly people because that thing is covered like an SEC football team or something, the Eagles, that one of your reasons to leave, it's not like you got fired or anything. I mean, Howie didn't want to lose you, was that your aspirations, you want to be a general manager in the NFL, correct? Is that fair to say?
I would say that has been my aspiration for sure. To do what I did for every year and learn the kinds of things that I did, get that level of experience. It's like Stout says, it's like bars of gold every day. You learn all this stuff. And so, yeah, I had ideas. I worked within a very specific system in terms of working for Howie and how all that went. But I felt like I acquired the breadth of knowledge and skills, and I have the personal traits to lead an organization. I felt like I got the most incredible education in running a team, even if you don't, Howie makes all the decisions. There's no question about that. But I see people get hired in the NFL who have neither made decisions nor have they actually seen it executed in terms of team building, organization building, everything that goes into it. It's not just about picking players. You know what I mean? There's so much that goes into having a continually successful organization. There aren't coincidences. There might be a 1 year like lightning in a bottle type of thing, but you don't have the consistent success that the Eagles have had by coincidence, right? So I've seen how all these parts contribute to the whole. And I've seen the way you can find edges in every single department in football, right? This isn't just about scouting better and coaching harder. Like that's I think some people think that, and sometimes the people who think that the most tend to be the decision makers, it seems, that are making these hires. But yeah, I felt like I could run an organization. I would run it differently than Howie. My skill set's different. Everyone's is. I would run it differently than most of the scouts who get hired. I would need to hire someone to oversee personnel. That wasn't necessarily going to be me. I wasn't going to be the head evaluator, but I didn't really see that as a challenge. I mean, you look at Fortune 500 companies, they're pulling CEOs who have strategic vision and can execute on that and build an organization. It's not about one like tactical skill. And for me, I feel like that skill in the NFL is overvalued.
See, I don't even think you need to go to the business world. Look at baseball and basketball. If you were
Correct.
in your position with the success you had, you would 100% be a GM in basketball or baseball, or at least have had, maybe you screwed up
Yeah.
the interviews or whatever, but you'd be interviewing every year. Where in football, I mean, you're closer to it than me, given that you've just been inside for the last 12 years. Is it safe to say that there's still a stigma with someone like you to be hired to run the personnel spot where the
I think
scouting
I
background
I
still
think
gets
it's
the,
not
or is
talked
that
about
changing?
as much. It's not talked about as much. I think, even in Philly, Howie like was given a very hard time for a very long time for a lot of reasons that were, beyond, there was a background as
By the
part
time
of
I got
it.
there, he was the boss,
Yeah.
and it was less, I
Right.
think, than probably years
Yeah.
previously. He was in control with
But
Andy. So
right. And I think like his track record at this point is irrefutable. So he has risen above. You can't really say a lot of those things. But the football guy, non-football guy, or what it's supposed to look like, or what someone's background is supposed to be to run a football team, still feels like that hasn't changed as much in the NFL as it has in other sports. I think that I have thought that there are owners or different profile of owners who have come into the league where they would transcend, like break out of this trend. And I think there are advantages to be gained by doing things a little differently. Like we see that all the time. Um, but it really hasn't happened in the league. So I had no intention of coming out publicly in the way that it did that I was leaving. I had started telling some agents and people in the league that I was leaving May 15th. One of our beat writers had heard it, and I wasn't telling people, hey, don't say anything. And so he grabbed Howie and said, hey, I know Jake's leaving and I'm going to write an article about it. And then it was, well, I'll talk to him because I want to make sure it's framed the right way. This isn't a negative situation. No one's telling me to leave. I'm one of the few people who I just basically stood up and walked myself out of the office. I left in great terms. I talked to people, in there every single day. I think players, staff, coaches will be my lifelong friends. I just stayed, my family and I stayed with a coach for 2 days at the shore a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I aspire to be a general manager. Do I think that that's going to happen? No, I don't think that that's going to happen. My intent in that article was to try to balance this is the general framing of what's going on. I didn't want to close any doors. I didn't want to say I am leaving, F this place, F the NFL. I never felt that way. And you never know what's around the corner. So I didn't want to close the door, but I can't say my phone's been ringing off the hook at all, which is interesting to me. But it means, honestly, it means that I read everything correctly.
which is crazy because you guys, I'm a West Coast guy. Niners get crushed for doing these contracts late, and you guys get all the credit for doing them early. So it's like you guys had a point of difference that you get so much credit for with the financial ability to construct your team. Obviously, you're Howie's right-hand guy. Did no one even call and be like, hey, we want you to run our cap
None,
after you were leaving?
none.
Even consult or like a Mike Vrabel situation? Like that seems a little nuts to me.
I got one. I have one. One.
Were you a little surprised by that? Had you interviewed before for a GM job?
No,
Had you ever done a formal interview?
no. I interviewed for a job in Washington the day before my contract ended in Philly, that came up very suddenly. Didn't know Adam. Had no expectations of that happening. I went and I did interview because I felt like for me, it wasn't that I was leaving in a, like I said, like not screw this place, I'm over. I just felt like I had done this job for a long time and I knew what the landscape was internally, and so I wasn't necessarily moving up internally. I'd hired Bryce Johnston in 2016. He was doing a great job and he loves doing a lot of the stuff that I don't love doing by any means. And he's great at it, like fucking mad scientist, contract guy. So that for the good of the team, I mean, you're giving stuff like that up, you're helping develop people, but I knew I wasn't going to pick up and learn different areas necessarily in Philly. And for better or worse, I was never, in the NFL, there's a balance between putting yourself out there and
yes,
versus being the guy who is a self-promoter or always kind of looking for the next job before he's even settled into his current job. I think that's a balance. The stability in terms of being in one place for my whole career was awesome. My kids have been in the same schools, their entire public school life. At some point, I think Howie and I worked so closely together. We did so much of this together, agents. I think with most people just assumed I would either never leave or want to leave. And so I just was a little bit of the part of the furniture. And when I did tell people I was leaving, I still don't think a lot of people thought I was really going to do it. Like I was some type of like bluffing or negotiation strategy, but no, I did it.
it's crazy to me. I've known Adam for even before I got to Philly. He's a stud. He's a good example of a guy that, in a league full of self-promoters, it's not really his style. Like that's not really his, and it's hard, right? Because it's such a public job and the money is so much greater with every step you take, whether it be an assistant coach to a coordinator to a head coach or be the third in command to assistant GM. It's tricky. And now the game's never been more popular. And like you said, the moment wind gets out that Jake Rosenberg's leaving, you got a beat writer, and then if other people get wind, but I think more and more NFL teams are being scavengers, being covered like that, and it's only going to grow at least for the foreseeable future.
I think that my story, or at least this, was probably covered a little bit more than normal, is because
that's
odd.
Fair.
It's odd. I was like Jerry Maguire, grabbing goldfish and running out of the office with Dorothy Boyd, but. Yeah, I didn't really feel that way, but I think that was a little bit of like, wait, there's got to be an angle here. There really was no angle.
And especially because the team, right, obviously it didn't finish great, but there should be pretty good this year, and you've had a good little run. Like it's kind of rolling.
No, it's been a great run. I know. It's been great. There's never a good time. And I kept telling myself when I leave, just like the day after the season ends, when you feel the absolute worst, you feel like you got punched in the nuts. That's best time. Just leave. That's your last day. Cool. I'm out. Once I stayed through free agency and the draft and all that stuff, then it tugs at your heart. You feel like this is my team now. And I'm rooting for them. I hope this is a great season, but if this gets to where I hope it does, will I feel a little bit of like, man, I could have stayed through a Super Bowl season or something? Sure. But you got to just pick a point and make it happen.
Not playing best ball at DraftKings? You're missing out. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with two millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're set it and forget it type, then Best Ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger roster so injuries won't end your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. 15 million prize pool. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a Draft One, Get One special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get in on all the best ball action. Download the DraftKings app and use the code John. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire contest to get a bonus ticket and get a shot at being crowned one of the 2 millionaires only on DraftKings. Okay, contracts for dummies.
Yeah, there we go.
When you're dealing with bigger star players, AJ, Jalen, whoever, what is the first thing on the team side? Where do you start?
Well, I do think that changes. That's a little different by team. Different teams prioritize different things. I think for us, we prioritize cash flow in terms of fewest dollars out the door fastest. In the NFL, there's a theme here in my mind in terms of managing cap or doing contracts that's consistent with everyday life or being in the market, wealth advisor, etc. Is you need to be responsive to what the current market situation and what your outlook is, right? Like, you shouldn't necessarily have the same stock bond allocation that you did 10 years ago now, if interest rates have changed and if all these other things have changed. I'm just using an example, right? You always should look around and say, is this still the best way to do it? So I think the way that the league has gone, having more options in terms of players get traded more readily, but things are a little bit more contentious. Maybe player empowerment is higher now. So I think the idea that
I think you're seeing it all around the league during training camp with these Holdins, with guys pissed off. But I mean, there's you can name 10 off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think it's been increasing every year for a while. I think NBA set the trend to some extent in terms of players who become the foundational piece. The entire thing is built around them, and then they decide one day, like, get me out of here. And that to me is like, oh my God, it's maddening. The league players have certainly gotten a bigger voice and have been able to sort of force their way a little bit more. So I think it's even more important to maintain, optionality. It's like, the example would be, Jordan Love, if a lot of cash leaves the door in year one, and this isn't going to happen on a deal like that, but if it's we'll pick an example, if it's a $50 million average, to use a rough number, right? And you pay $80 million in the first year, and then there's only $20 million coming to them in the second year. Players don't necessarily have the perspective to be fair about looking backwards. They look forwards. And so all of a sudden it's like, I know, or that there's an average to this deal, right? And there may be big cash flow in the beginning, but then it's got to come back to the average over time. Player just looks forward and he's like, man, all these guys are making $50 million a year and I only have $20 million coming to me. And then you're like, yeah, that's because you got 80 last year. You're like, no, I only have $20 million coming to me. That's crazy. I'm not playing for that. And so I think that's one part of it. And then secondarily, trading players has become a much bigger part of it too. And if the money is still in your pocket, meaning it's going to be paid in a salary or a roster bonus or some other way, you could trade it until it's earned or paid. And so there is an advantage to, on a $50 million deal, I'm just saying, having 50, 50, 50, 50, rather than, 90 and 10 or whatever. Normally it will take a little bit longer to come back to a baseline average, but you understand the point. I think cash flow is a big thing and players want the cash in their hands faster for investment reasons.
Jordan Love's a good example because I was looking before we hopped on. He got a $75 million signing bonus. And typically I always thought when you get a signing bonus that comes within like a 10 to 14 day period, but you can write it out.
Yeah.
Like his is 125 now, 25 in October, 25 in December. Is that one that people argue over a lot, that the dates of how signing bonus is paying out?
Because it's become a thing where certain teams will defer it a year, 2 years out. So signing bonus really means you've earned it when you sign, right? It doesn't mean it's paid out right when you sign. And how soon it's paid out is absolutely negotiated. Some teams, it's just organizational policy, or they'll say this is their precedent and they will hold on to it for a while. So, to use the Bobby Bonilla type of thing, or Shohei Ohtani, or their deferrals, I mean, you are deferring it. So the longer a team could hold on to the money, it's worth less in present value, but that's not necessarily the intent of it. And, but that is a point of negotiation. And with draft picks, particularly in the first round, that's turned into one of the items that is negotiated, how fast they get their signing bonus.
What about the escrow thing? Is that something you dealt with a lot? Like if I
Funding? Yeah.
So if I guarantee Jordan Love, let's just use that. There are other numbers, but that $75 million signing bonus, do I have to have the $75 million signing bonus in reserves, even if my next two payments, one's in October and one's in December? How does that work?
So typically they don't necessarily go all the way to the next funding deadline, but it really is about fully guaranteed payments in subsequent years. I really am afraid we're going to lose people here. You're going to see people going samurai style. Samurai style, like airplane. So January 31st is the funding threshold. So anything that's fully guaranteed as of January 31st, but hasn't been paid out yet, is subject to funding. And then by April 1st, with some other little permutations, the team basically needs to move however much money there was as of January 31st that qualified into this escrow account. Now, anything that becomes fully guaranteed after January 31st is not subject to that April 1st. So that's why you see a lot of guarantees that are intended, or the spirit of it is to be fully guaranteed, but not vest to fully guaranteed until after January 31st. January 31st is before the Super Bowl. So it's a prior season. The first day of the waiver period is really the earliest you'll see someone have a vesting date, like the Monday after the Super Bowl as of 4:00. Most teams don't want to do that. That happens very infrequently because it puts them in a very difficult situation. You really can't do anything with a player there. You have no optionality to keep using that. So very typically, first day league year, third day league year, fifth day league year, you'll see an injury only guarantee turn into a skill injury and cap guarantee, because if it's for the following year, it would have to be funded following April 1st.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's pick the number 50 for guarantees, and then or true guarantees, and then we'll go to 100 for the injury guarantees. Am I doing that backwards? Which one's usually bigger?
That's right. The full guarantee will be less. But
explain to me, can you explain to people what the difference is of the guaranteed and the injury guarantee?
Yeah. Injury guarantee is a guarantee that, so there's 3 buckets you could cut a player under. A skill, which means the player from a skill perspective is not
good enough,
worthy of being on my team. Injury means the player has not kept himself physically in condition to be on my team. And cap, which is a little bit tougher to explain, but basically I could find the same kind of player at a lesser price. That's more or less it. So the most valuable guarantee is skill, injury, and cap. That's synonymous with full guarantee. And that means that outside of a few conditions, more or less, an injury that's not sustained, murder would be one. An injury, not on a football field somewhere or in a football building. It's very difficult to cut that player, right? You effectively, that's full. An injury just means if the player is healthy and you don't think he's good enough, or you think his number's too high, you can cut the player. You just can't cut him if he's hurt. And typically, those injury guarantees will convert at some point to a full guarantee.
At a certain date.
And so that winds up being, that comes to the forefront in the sense that typically that conversion date is, like I said, it's either in the waiver period or within the first few days of the league year. If a player is injured from the prior season and by that vesting date is not healthy, you would not be able to cut him, and that guarantee will vest to full. And so the behavior that winds up triggering is when you have a player that you're almost certain that you're not going to want for the following season, who has a guarantee that converts, it's dicey putting that guy on the field in the prior season, because a major injury he sustains will basically mean his salary for the following year is guaranteed, or some part of it, depending on.
I think the best example, because Russell was a different example because he had so much contract left. They had remember 2 years ago, Derek Carr with the Raiders, the last 3 games, I think the number would have been like 25 million or 30 million.
That happens.
And so they got benched. The Russell thing is a good example of when you have these huge guarantees. I think people struggle with the dead money, because when I do a signing bonus and the guaranteed, if I push that back on my cap, so my cap hits smaller early, bigger later, if I cut that player, i.e. Russell Wilson, that accelerates forward. Is that correct?
You're using all the right words. I like it. I would say, just enough, just enough to be dangerous is what they say.
Exactly.
The dead money is money that has been, so you have the ability to prorate bonuses in the NFL, right? Any money, like paid in a signing bonus, for instance, you could prorate up to 5 years. So you divide the amount of the bonus, divide it evenly amongst the first 5 years of the contract, and it keeps the cap number lower than what the actual cash out of pocket, right? Player gets it all. Proration has nothing to do with player payment. And then if at some point that contract gets terminated, any of these prorated amounts that are out into the future will come back onto your cap, depending on whether they're before June 1st or after, whether it's this season or the following season. That's where you get acceleration. I think that the term dead money is bandied about, thrown around in press conferences. There's like fear factor about dead money. There are a lot of people talk about, well, our cap wouldn't let us do this, and we're in cap hell, we're doing all these things. To me, those are not well thought out strategies, and you should never not. If you're not able to do what you want, or your owner is willing to commit X amount of cash in a current season, regardless of how miserable certain things look about your football team as far as the contracts and the structure, you should be able to figure out how to spend the cash. To me, it's a huge fail. And fans just take that. They're just like, oh, okay, cool. We're in cap hell. We'll see you in 3 years. Maybe we'll be competitive then. Like, I think that's crazy.
But there are some instances when you say, like, let's use Russell Wilson as an example, because he had so much contract left. Those numbers are pretty prohibitive and just pretty massive. I mean, I think, aren't they historic?
They're massive.
Like,
yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't do stuff. It's just a huge.
Right.
They technically couldn't they technically have eaten the whole thing this year at like 85 million instead of splitting it out with 2 years?
I think that correct, depending on when they did it, and how it worked. But the issue that I think is you always have players who have salaries that are larger than minimum that you can restructure to prorate amounts. So you have a lot that you can do. It just comes back to what is your philosophy on managing cap. And I think a lot of teams will tell you, they don't need to tell you. You just look at their contracts and look at what they do, and you will see that most of what they do is the exact same strategy that they used, pick a point, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which is what I just sometimes my eyes glaze over about, because part of this, there's an art to this. Like, you have to anticipate where the cap is going to go and what the current economics are. If you're doing something the exact same way you did under completely different circumstances, I just think you're not doing a great job. I'll just say that.
I think this offseason, you guys took advantage of something that once, 3-4 years ago was looked at crazy. Then these running backs became a major discount. I mean, it'd be like $1 million home 5 years ago. Well, it's now worth $650,000. And Saquon Barkley, you guys sign him, he gets less than 30 guaranteed. But I look, his cap hit this year is, I think, less than $4 million. So when you do something like that, there has to come a time where some of that money gets allocated on a given year that gets bigger. But this year, you could, like Jalen last year, wasn't his cap hit really, really small?
Yeah,
And this year, I think it's small.
This is right. These are all parts of larger strategies, I would say, in terms of just maximizing how much cash you could spend. If your ownership wants to spend in excess of what the salary cap is in a given year, if you use proration well, you should be able to do it regardless of these other albatross sort of dead money things that you have. I mean, this is a feature, not a bug, of the way that better teams manage cap, in terms of, if you are planning and doing scenarios, you shouldn't have to cut players because of a cap situation. You shouldn't be hamstrung from adding players because of a cap situation. You just don't want to. Yeah. That's the reality of it. Or
obviously,
you're not.
Some owners have more.
To figure out
some owners have more cash than others. Is that fair?
Right,
to say?
But my point would be, even if you have someone who's got $50 million of dead money on your cap, so you have this $50 million hole, or if you will, that you can't spend on players, just utilizing proration really well, you should still be able to spend $200 million of cash.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's just how you want to present it. It's not that you can't, it's just you don't want to. It's an excuse. It's not.
What about the mechanisms when it comes to the salary cap on trading guys? You were part of when Carson was traded, and a couple years ago when Matt Ryan was traded, and they had big, a lot of money and cash paid. Is that more complicated than just all out cutting a player than Russell? Or is it actually easier?
No, not complicated. The benefit of trading is they take these cash flows, or if there's guaranteed money, they're just taking that dollar for dollar right off of your books. The acceleration part of it is the same as if you would cut that player at that particular moment. So if it's before June 1st, any acceleration, any of the proration that you had on there comes back into that year. But the advantage to trading over cutting is that guaranteed monies leave, right, and are no longer your responsibility. If you were to cut a player who has a full guarantee, you're on the hook for paying that full guarantee if you were to cut them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. What's your favorite contract you ever worked on?
My favorite contract I ever worked on, man. I don't know. I'd say like 2012 LaShawn McCoy, maybe. I don't know.
What was the most difficult?
For certain reasons I can't say, but I mean, I love LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, who doesn't?
I haven't seen him in a long time, but I love that. I also would say Jalen's too, because I love Jalen. I have a great personal relationship with Jalen. I think the world of him as a person. Tons of respect for him. And I really like Nicole too. Nicole and I worked awesome together. I appreciate what she's done. It's been a meteoric rise. I don't know of any agent whose first real deal was a franchise quarterback type deal. So that's incredible. And that's, I mean, ultimately, whether Howie was having the day-to-day conversations on a particular deal, whether I was more involved, how it worked, like, it really is a very incredible thing to see in your very eyes. I sat with every single player who signed a contract while they were signing, and you're just part indirectly. I mean, you're watching someone's life change instantaneously. Everything they've worked in, worked for and put in, that is an incredible incredibly powerful and awesome thing. I mean, I've seen it with so many players I love, and I've seen how they change too, like for the better, over time and grow. It's incredible.
When you see these situations, I mean, former Eagle Hassan Reddick, this Matt Judon, when you're having these conversations and a guy wants more money, sometimes it's just like, well, we don't have the capability. Like, this is not something we're that interested in, and we really don't have the room to do what these guys want. Like, you just have to draw a line in the sand. Like, do you always know there's like a line, or I mean, I know Howie and you guys, that feels like that can move. Like, well, we can make this
Yeah,
work if we really want to work. Like you've been kind of alluding to this
it's
whole time.
hard. Well, yeah, I mean, but you have a roster of 53 players. If you only had a couple of players and you make an exception for one, that's fine. But that then you're going to have 10 more players at your door. It's no different than if you have kids and you treat one different than the other. So I think that it's that you can do it, but the complication of all these moving parts, and when things have some level of equilibrium and you feel like people are relatively happy and your team is stable, when you have to put yourself in a very difficult situation. I mean, the nature of the job is how he has a ton of decisions every single day to make. Some of them are relatively minor. Some of them are are significant. People never even know about. But when a player is asking for more money and you're making an additional commitment going forward, you're looking at your entire team, the whole balance. You're looking at where you are next year, how old the player is going to be. Then you're looking at analytics and where do players fall off, because no player maintains their performance forever, right? So you're always afraid of being 1 year too late rather than 1 year too early. It's complicated. There's a lot there, and it's easy to second guess if it doesn't go well. But
It's not easy.
no,
I know I've kept you a long time, so I want to hit on the athlete group. And I know you partnered with Oklahoma. I was talking to a buddy of mine that runs a major Power Five team, and he was telling me about this guy. They gave $800,000 to a high school recruit,
mm-hmm,
and I knew you were coming on. I was thinking,
mm-hmm.
what's the draft slot where it's $800,000 is the cutoff? Like, I mean, are we talking like, is
Oh
that
man,
mid-second round? I mean, that's pretty
yeah,
high. I mean, that's a
yeah.
lot of
No, it's
money.
high. It is a lot of money. I would say that I've heard far larger numbers.
Yeah,
But I also would
this was
stress,
a lineman, not a
yeah,
quarterback, or
yeah,
this is just
lineman.
a
No, I know.
18-year-old
Yeah,
lineman.
yeah. No, I have heard a lot of those things. Um, but I'd say like my role though, I am not negotiating on behalf of a team. They're not outsourcing team building to me by any means. Um, my main function here in college sports right now, the way I see it, is these programs as a whole. It may be an athletic director that wants to assess where they are now versus where they need to get to, or it's been lately a lot of football offices themselves who realize that they need the help, that they're just not structured in the right way. They're not equipped to evaluate this many players, to understand how to live in an environment where building your team is based on allocating assets and spending money, not about just recruiting the crap out of players. Like, it's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different process. Um, if you're going to evaluate, I don't know exactly what the number is, but with the portal, if it's twice or three times the number of players that you have in the past, how do you adapt to meet that need? Evaluating players is far more important than it was, in the sense that you have that many more and you got to compare. Is it a 1 year portal fill in? Is it building through high school, which roughly equates to an NFL draft versus NFL free agency being the portal? How do those prices compare in terms of what you're going to have to give a kid out of high school? Or maybe it's two players out of high school equal one portal guy. And is that better for the culture? There are just so many different changes in mentality that need to go on to build a team in this way. The first instinct everyone always thinks about is like, oh, well, I could help them, me personally with my background, I could help them figure out how to pay better, like what the comps are, how to effectively match a player's salary with the quality of play. And I believe I could help. There are certain, techniques or things we could do. But the real issues at heart here are that the way college football, I'm saying college football because it's the easiest thing to talk about at the moment, but college sports as a whole, the way they've operated going way back, it no longer is effective anymore. There's just so many new dynamics. And if you are scouting, recruiting, everything the way that you have done in the past, this has actually been a theme for however long we've been talking, but that you have to adapt. You have to look at what is the situation right now, and are we best set up? Are people doing what they're best at? Do we need to specialize? Like, how do these things change? Coaches do what in college football? Coaches coach, they recruit, and they scout. Coaches in the NFL do a little scouting. They don't do much, do a little recruiting, sort of. They coach. And what do scouts do? They scout. And if you watch players all day, every day, that's what you do. You're going to get better at it. If you are splitting your time between 3 different things and you're watching players and this is just normal efficiency, and whatever you save in terms of efficiencies, resources flow to the players. So everyone in that office now, they're used to having analysts, up the ass. Save an analyst, add a player, maybe. If you find improvements elsewhere, that's the reality of it, efficient.
So you partner with Oklahoma, who's going into the SEC, and obviously, it's just a lot of pressure with the money that's going to be involved there. You immediately, I saw you were down there within the last couple of weeks, right? You go meet with Venables and the athletic director. How do you even get your hands around this? Because in the NFL, there are rules, right? I mean, you can fudge them a little bit.
I'm seeing what's going on. Yeah,
there's no
I'm
rules.
Learning.
I mean, in the NIL, really.
It's a lot more lax. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I've never done this before. Oh, I did. I management consulted when I first got to college, but I knew what my background was, what my experience was, and how I thought I could help. I know I can help now after having conversations with, AD, head coach, GM. I know I have a lot I can help them with, and not just me. This whole thing, my idea here with Athlete Group in this business is that my network is probably the best thing that I have going for me. I know a lot of people. I've built a lot of great relationships. There are a lot of people who are looking for ways to help, who are in the NFL 1 year, then they're out of the NFL, and they're looking to consult. They're looking to help evaluate. And I figured to myself, this problem in college football, there's going to be things that I'll encounter in one of these engagements where a scout needs to help them. A scout needs to work through a better grading scale or a better way to evaluate. I know those people. I'll bring in great scouts to work with them. I'll bring in great coaches who can sit there and talk to the coaches and explain why they might be better off if they're not primary evaluators. And I thought it was a great way to use my experience and what I've seen, help make a difference now, because this thing is coming, and everybody needs to help. Oh, it's here. But in terms of this hard cap, and it's not just ask for more money to the collective. It's no, there ain't no more money, dude. You gotta figure it out. And so I thought I could legitimately make a difference. I could explain this is every day. This is a different way of thinking than what they have thought in the past. And so I'm gonna see how I can help, and I'm gonna see. Every school will have a little bit different plan or what they need. I think I'll help some schools hire. I think I'll help some ADs just get the lay of the land, and because ADs are a little panicked too. They don't know what's going on either. And this is their money that's going to be spent. So that's what I'm helping with.
If you had to, I know you've just kind of dipped your toe in this in the last couple months, but after you got the lay of the land, do you think a potential NIL cap is on the horizon as college football kind of figures everything out, or is that just going to be too hard to happen?
I'm not involved in any of these, conversations at a high level, but whether
would you recommend that
executed an NIL cap? No, because I think players are worth what players are worth, and no one is really going to be capping that in the sense that if a player has a huge social media following, plays a premier position, is in a premier college, and has the opportunity to move the needle and sign, I don't know, pick a sponsor or whatever, whoever, a Bose deal,
$5 million or whatever.
That's legit, and they should be allowed to do that. It's just a question of the pay for play type of stuff that has been disguised as NIL, and if there is a good way to take that out, and then you have a legitimate cap, you will have players who still can monetize if they're able to move the needle and do stuff like that. And that seems like a much better system, but there's a lot of, you need to keep law and order there, and that's always the issue.
I guess I separated the two. I looked at pay for play, which is technically illegal, but is obviously happening everywhere. And then there's the guys getting the commercials and stuff, which I guess I didn't factor. Obviously, that is NIL, but I almost look at that two different, because pay for play is clearly pretty out of control right now, right? Which
but pay for play is going to come in house, though. I think that the revenue share and the settlement, schools will opt in, they will get rev share, and they will know, each football program, for instance, will know what they have to spend on players. The question is, above that, from an NIL perspective, how that functions and whether the cap becomes the floor. What was it Jordan said? The roof is the ceiling?
Yeah, the ceiling's the roof.
Yeah, sorry. Or whether the cap is the floor, and these schools that have these huge collectives can still pile money on through other means. That would be a little sad to me. I like caps. Caps are fun. They make you really be strategic and solve problems and try to build a better mousetrap, and it's not just a crazy arms race.
Yeah, no, you got to go. But Eagles 49ers part 2 NFC Championship game this year.
I'm here for it. I would love it. I'll be there, because I'll be there. That, I don't want to get into it, but that's the amount of whining and crying and was so unbecoming.
True,
unbecoming. But take it. Just take it. Just take it.
A year later, we saw the regular season game.
Oh, if this didn't happen, and but there was no crying. There was no crying. Look at the Super Bowl.
And it did happen.
I'll just say this: I'm proud of this. It didn't. Look at this. We lost the Super Bowl. Very, very.
See, now you're crying.
No, I'm not. I'm saying we all know that to have happened. There was not a single trace of that from a single person within the Philadelphia Eagles, and I like that approach. Different approaches, different people.
I'd say Bradbury's a little quieter than Debo, so that probably helps.
Not just him, though. Everyone had an opportunity. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you guys. You guys just got a less. All right. Fletcher's not a big talker, but I hear you. I think the Eagles are going to be good. I mean, I've been on record their roster's loaded.
Yeah.
So Niners going to be good. The Lions going to be good. Packers going. The NFC is going to be really good this year, I think.
That's what we think. We'll see what happens. That's why we all watch. You never know.
Okay, Jake. Good luck. Keep rocking and rolling, and don't forget about us in 2 years when you're an NFL GM and you're running the show.
I wouldn't hold your breath, but cool.
Okay, thanks again, man.